Welcome inside Black and Gold. Steve Geller along with Jeff Nowak gearing up for Week 8, a road trip to Indianapolis, the final AFC opponent for the Saints this season. And then it's all NFC after that, baby. But 3-4 versus 3-4, 2-game losing streaks. So much parity there.
Yeah, well, I mean, and we talked to Mickey Loomis on WWL this week, and he was asked whether, the trade deadline has been heating up, if he's making calls.
Yes,
and one of the things he pointed to is like one of the reasons you don't see a ton of trades in the NFL is everyone feels like they're still in it right now. The Colts feel like they're still in it. The Saints feel like they're still in it. Even these 2-5 teams, they feel like with one win this week, they're right back in it. 3-5, you're right in position for the second half of the season. You win a good number of games, and you make a run at the playoffs. Teams aren't quitting from there. And you rarely will see deals get done between two buyers, right? You need a buyer and a seller. And there's probably, 2 or 3 teams in the NFL right now that would consider themselves sellers, like the Panthers, the Cardinals, like maybe a few others, if they lose this week and they're at 2-6. But either way, it's something that the Saints and Colts definitely feel like they're both very much in contention in divisions that are not running away from anybody, right? So we'll look at that. We're going to talk to Lawrence Owen. He's the host of the Bleav in Colts podcast. He also has a show on YouTube called Colts Law that's going to break down a lot of, if you want to kind of get in depth on what the Colts have been doing, what they've looked like with Gardner Minshew, that sort of thing. Check that out. We'll have him in the second segment. Then in the final segment, I wanted to get into some of the notes that came up that I found from the defense in that loss to the Jaguars. Some concerning things that I think they have to fix this week, in particular when they go up and face the Colts. And then we're going to talk about X factors as we do. But in this first segment, I want to talk pretty much exclusively about Derek Carr. And the first question I have to ask, and it's just because it's been brought up to me and I didn't even know this was a thing. And then I went down the rabbit hole last night. And it's actually really funny. And he seems to be a good sport about it. So I don't think he's going to get mad at me. He might. I don't know.
His brother might.
He did get paid for it. So if you're going to take money, then it's fair game. And the question is, does Derek Carr wear eyeliner? And if you Google this, there is quite a rabbit hole to go down. This is not the first time. Like, I was like, oh, this is something that maybe was said in jest at one point. No, this is something that Derek himself has said has been asked about him throughout his entire life, which is kind of fascinating. And when you look back and you see some of it kind of does look like he's wearing eyeliner. But did you know about this? Were you aware of this?
Yeah, I've definitely heard about the Derek Carr eyeliner, but I mean, I never really took anything seriously about it. I just figured he has, I guess, really defined eyelashes.
Yeah, well, he actually got asked on the Dan Patrick show about it. Like, Dan Patrick asked him directly, and yeah, I think what's going on, I don't think Derek Carr wears eyeliner, and I think anyone who knows about makeup would tell you that he's not wearing eyeliner. That's pretty obvious. If he's wearing anything, it's mascara. Because
during the game, getting ready for the game,
right? If you see like the drips coming down his face, but because I think that is what it is, right? He has very dark eyelashes, and they kind of give the natural outline that makes it look like he's wearing eyeliner. But Derek Carr himself has taken money for this joke, and so here I want to play that for you. I'm going to play the audio here, and we'll listen to it.
This face.
EECU's gonna choose me to be their auto loan spokesperson.
EECU's gonna choose me.
That's David Carr.
Local. I know what a great rate is.
It would be perfect to get a great car rate from Derek Carr.
What if I break the internet? His hair.
I just look into the camera like this.
Derek's gonna be crushed. They're choosing me.
They're choosing me. What is he doing here?
Are you wearing eyeliner?
It's called guyliner.
Looks like eyeliner.
EECU. Smarter banking.
See?
Bravo to him for playing on that. I mean, take the money for sure.
Right. Until I saw that, I was like, would this be unfair to make a joke about this? But yeah, once you get paid by a car insurance company to make a joke about yourself, I can make it. But yeah, so like he's not, it is something like his own brother is making that joke in a car insurance ad. So it's definitely something that he's aware of. And, I don't think he wears eyeliner. I mean, I don't think he wears mascara. I think, again, he just has really dark eyelashes. And that's like one of the lowest level conversation that needs to be had about Derek Carr right now. But I felt like we've been having so many really intense, angry conversations about Derek Carr. It was time we talked about something that was with a bit more levity. But that's it. That's all I got. How do you feel about that?
I mean, I thought it was great. I was like, I'm ready for the guyliner sponsor now for Derek Carr. I guess you got to play better to get that, though. Oh,
it's guyliner.
Right.
Anyway, so we're going to talk more about Derek Carr, and one thing that came up last week, and we talked about this in the post game, and there's been talk about it all week. Dennis Allen's been asked, Eric McCoy's been asked, Derek Carr has been asked. Is what is the feasibility of using the hurry up a whole lot more often than just in 2-minute scenarios or when desperation comeback scenarios? And one thing that Derek said is, it is kind of something that he really feels comfortable in. And he said it's his dream to just do that all the time, but he understands that can't happen all the time. It's unrealistic. That said, you can see, if you just look at the numbers. So the Saints went into the hurry up about halfway through the third quarter, immediately after the pick six by Foye Oluokun, right? So they were down 24-9. They needed 2 touchdowns and a 2-point conversion. So they didn't have time to waste. So they went to the 2-minute tempo offense right there. And they really never turned back. They basically went to it the rest of the game. And so that first drive, they started that. Derek was 6 for 6, 45 yards. It was a 7-minute, 26-second drive. And they scored a touchdown. Taysom Hill pounded it in on 4th down. And, anytime you can say 6 for 6 for 45 yards, for an offense that has looked stuck in the mud so much of this season and has been inefficient, not only like they've moved the ball, but they've been inefficient in moving the ball. You're not seeing 6 for 6 drives. I think you kind of look at that and like, okay, you gotta do stuff like that. Whether it is,
how do we do that more? Exactly.
Right. And whether it's all hurry up, or is like, there's got to be more that you can pull out of that than just, okay, we went fast, so it worked. Right. Yeah. He got in a rhythm. He had the next drive didn't work. That was the Rashid Shaheed drive, or I'm sorry, that was the Chris Olave drive where he threw the ball out of bounds and yelled at Rashid. That was a 3-and-out down at their own goal line. Lou Hedley had a 62-yard punt, and then the Saints got the ball back. The next drive, it was a short. Oh, I'm sorry. That was the next drive. They got stopped on 4th down, and the Saints took it over just past midfield. And that drive, 3 for 3, 53 yards, touchdown to Michael Thomas, then Kamara 2-point conversion. So those 2 scoring drives, Derek Carr was 9 for 9 for 98 yards and a touchdown. And they scored another touchdown on another drive.
Like it, love it, need more of it.
That second drive was in this, the time of that second drive is what becomes an issue that was a 51-second drive.
Right.
Now you can say, well, that's bad for the defense, but the defense forced a punt after that. They got the Saints the ball back. I don't think they were necessarily I think that drive down at the goal line there, I think they were trying to be more methodical. They tried to get back to their standard offense. And when you know it, 3-and-out, that was the drive that Derek Carr got hit, quote unquote, in an area. And yeah, next drive. So they got the ball back down 7 with about, I want to say 3.5 minutes, something like that. Derek Carr, the final results of that drive, 5 for 10, 50 yards. But there were those 4 straight incompletions at the end. So to get down to the 6-yard line, Derek Carr was 5 for 6 for 50 yards. And so even if you include those 4 final heaves, you're talking about 67% completion percentage. If you take those 4 out and you just say from the point they started the hurry up to the point they decided our only option from the 6-yard line is to chuck it into the end zone, he completed 80% of his passes for 159 yards and a touchdown. So I mean, like, I get it. You don't want to tire out your offensive linemen. You can't constantly be doing hurry up and your offense. And Dennis Allen said this, over time defenses will adjust, but like nothing has worked. That's basically the only thing that feels like it has been consistent and effective throughout the course of the game, other than deep shots and checkdowns. So I don't know.
Yeah, I think it's pretty clear. Like you're pointing out those stats, and obviously what we saw, that this team needs to find a way to incorporate it more and earlier. Just because, how comfortable Carr is with it, and he, like you said, talked about that, how he wishes he could do it all the time, realizes that's not feasible. But still, I mean, let's dial it up a little more though with this team.
Yeah, there are ways you can do similar things without constantly being in tempo offense. Like Big play on first down, hit it, right? Have 2 plays called in the huddle. That's what Eric McCoy was talking about this week. It's like, you don't necessarily have to constantly be sending Derek up there and having him make the decision, but you can go up to the line knowing what the next play is going to be in the sequence. And if your first down play doesn't work, then, dial it back. Like, make sure you get in the right play, take your time. But if that first play does work and you can just go bang, bang, hit him again, you got to be ready to do that. And that's just the type of things that I think this offense is overcomplicating itself, trying to get everything perfect. When I think this is a very good application of the term of the saying, the enemy of good is great, or great is the enemy of good. Like, perfect is the enemy of success. It's like, we don't need to be perfect to be successful, but we do need to be successful to be perfect. And I think that's where you're looking at it. And that's kind of goes into last week when I was talking about Pete Carmichael was saying, we have to look at streamlining this offense. And while, it might catch people as weird when the offense hasn't really been working and you're talking about making it less complicated, I think people take that the wrong way. They think complicated is good. Complicated is only good if you run it the right way. And I thought Derek Carr's answer to this question about, streamlining the offense in general was telling in that regard. And so here's that. He and some others talk about kind of streamlining things a bit, maybe paring down the offensive attack that people are comfortable with. Obviously, in the hurry up that's kind of happening naturally, we have a limited menu. Do you think that's part of the second half? You kind of just got into a rhythm of what's been working and what people are comfortable with?
Yeah, a lot of that is, game plan plays, or I should say training camp type plays, right? You have your game plan plays, and you have to have those because you have to be able to attack a defense a certain way, have answers for certain things, and be ready for anything in a football game. But I think it was just nice, excuse me, for our guys. We were just running training camp, kind of plays, in that mode that we were in, and there was a few game plan looks that we got to and things like that. So it was a nice mix. And so, I think doing that, I've been a part of, 500 play game plans, and I've also been a part of, 45 play game plans, and I've seen both do success, and I've seen you come off the field and you're like, wow, well, that didn't work, you've been on both sides. So this really takes a deep dive into the study of the team, your own personnel, what's best for your guys, and that's just a short answer for like a pretty big answer kind of question.
Yeah, and so like by training camp plays, right? To me, that I think what he's saying there is plays that everyone has run 100 times and is very comfortable with, as opposed to plays that you have installed this week specifically because this is how the Jaguars like to play. This is what they want to do in these certain coverages. So we're going to have plays that attack that. Now, if those are the plays that aren't working and you can just get back to your bread and butter and have success, do that. I cannot say this loudly enough. Do that. Stop overthinking it. Use your playmakers and allow them to make plays. And I think that's what the Saints did well in that second half, regardless of how quickly they were running. It was clear that they got into a rhythm and were comfortable. And you have to find ways to manufacture that, whether it's going fast, whether it's just limiting your scheme and making sure that everything that you're running is going to work in terms of the execution. Got to do it. And so, I'm hoping that when you say, okay, they're headed in the right direction, I'm hoping that that is a sign that they can figure that out and do that. Because if you can generate offense the way you did in the second half and not necessarily have to constantly be go to do it, then everything's going to feel a lot easier, and we can stop talking about how Derek Carr might be the most criticized quarterback in the NFL right now.
For sure.
And the funny thing is when you hear like the Jameis complaint
Hive
has always been, well, when Jameis screws up, everyone talks about it nonstop forever. But when it's a white quarterback, they're just like, well, he did his best. Well, I don't think you can make that argument about Derek Carr right now because
he's getting it this week for sure.
I mean, it seems like every former quarterback in NFL history has come out.
Yeah, any analyst, any former quarterback, everybody's piling it on with Carr this week.
Yeah, JT O'Sullivan, Chase Daniel, Kurt Warner, Dan Orlovsky, everybody is going after him in terms of, well, why didn't this happen? Why didn't this happen? Kurt Warner and Chase Daniel were a little more on the whole team sucks side of the equation, as opposed to this is completely on Derek Carr, which is kind of the approach it felt like JT O'Sullivan was taking. And yeah, Derek was asked about JT O'Sullivan's breakdown specifically. And this is what he said.
When your quarterback do a 43-minute video and says some very unkind things about you, is that do you take that personally when another quarterback does that?
I don't know who it was. I didn't see a video. But I've seen a lot of quarterbacks run a lot of similar plays. And I've been in a lot of systems where they're read differently. You're taught different things in the game plan. Hey, if this safety's going this way, we want to work this way or this. And so I will never be that guy to do that to somebody. So I'm sorry I don't know exactly what you're talking about, but no matter who it was, I really don't care. Because they're not in my meeting room with my coaches, with the communication with our players that, hey, we're going after this matchup. Same mirrored play, we're going to do this. There was actually, someone sent me one where it was funny because there was actually a bust on the defense and everyone was mad at, two of us for not doing a certain thing. I was like, man, we didn't know they were going to screw that up. You expect a certain thing and we did a certain thing, So that crap happens, but I'm sorry that I don't know exactly what it was.
JT O'Sullivan who was a quarterback here for a while.
Oh yeah, sorry. Yeah, I'm sorry. I didn't see it. He's more than welcome to come, do it with me in our meeting room. He can come kick it with us, and I don't have hard feelings towards anybody doing that because, how media, some media is, they're trying to make it about them and, certain things, and I don't know if people are trying to do that or not trying to do that. I just don't pay attention to any of it. I just try and be great, communicator for you guys when I can on Wednesdays and after the game.
I would find it hilarious if JT was like, yeah, Derek, I'll be there next week.
That would be so amazing.
If he just
it's
called
like,
him out.
Can we film the session too, please?
Yeah. How about we go through a breakdown, like the John Gruden quarterback school kind of thing? How about we go and I'll ask you some questions about how certain reads should be handled, and we'll do that because Derek Carr knows who JT O'Sullivan is. I don't buy that for a second that he's unaware, because he even mentioned in his interview, he mentioned one of the plays that JT broke down specifically.
Right.
So
I know, it's one of those things like, no, I don't know what you're talking about.
I mean, I do think that he's probably being truthful in the sense that he didn't sit down and watch a 43-minute video
but he's aware of it. Right.
Well, I think he probably was sent a clip.
Sure.
And it's the play he's talking about. But who that guy is. He's a former Saints backup. It's not like he's it's not like he's me sitting on YouTube.
I don't know what you're I'm not aware of that.
JT who? Anyway.
No,
I mean, and to be fair, I'm not defending Derek Carr in any way here. He deserves criticism, and these breakdowns are more than fair. I've watched several of them. Like I said, JT's was 43 minutes long. He went through a lot. But I think if your criticism of Derek Carr is that he's being given a pass for some of his struggles these first 7 weeks, that's not the case. He's not getting a pass from anybody. Whether it's him yelling at his teammates, or whether it's missing reads or not sending the protection the right way, or whatever, forcing the ball into tight coverage and it gets picked off, whatever you want to say, I don't think he's getting a pass for any of it. So I'd like to see him take that and improve. But
how do you feel about some of the folks, the outside chatter talking about how John Gruden needs to be brought in as a consultant for this? And we've heard Dennis Allen say they don't want to bring anybody from the outside, and there's nobody that's going to help, kind of thing. And to me, just because too, with Gruden's standing with the league isn't the greatest, I'm not so keen on it, honestly.
They're not bringing in John Gruden. I don't know why everyone's obsessed with John Gruden. I guess because he has a good relationship with Derek Carr.
Right.
And if he was going to get hired anywhere, it would be here because, for example, I mean, it's not happening this year, regardless. If there's anything that Dennis Allen has been very consistent in that. You can criticize Dennis Allen for a lot of things, but it's not for waffling on that front. He's not making coaching changes or making staff additions just to do it, just to placate people. Because if he was, Pete Carmichael would not be the play caller anymore, because that is the most obvious way to placate fans, and he knows that. It's not like he's unaware of the criticism that's being levied at Pete Carmichael. He knows that if he just said, "Hey, Ronald, you're the play caller now. Pete, be the game plan offensive coordinator," that a lot of people would say thank you, and you would actually generate some positive fan sentiment just from that decision alone. He's not going to do that. That's not the type of coach he is, to make that decision simply to get out of his own shadow of criticism. And so, I actually think there's something to be said for that. You can say it's bullish, it's bullheadedness, whatever, but He doesn't believe that changing play callers would actually change anything. And I'm not sure it would either. But my take is like sometimes you just got to do it to affect change. But he's not doing that with John Gruden. Now, in the offseason, there was one scenario that I feel like maybe you bring in Gruden, but it would still be a bad one in that you fired Dennis Allen and you're stuck with Derek Carr for another year regardless. And you just have to find a coach that can work with him and maybe salvage it if it doesn't turn around this year. And in that case, maybe it makes sense, even on just a short-term basis, because you really don't have any other options in terms of you got to pair Derek Carr with somebody. But I still don't think that's going to happen either. And John Gruden is just that name that everyone knows. And anytime it's like when there's a free agent and he hasn't been signed by anybody through 12 weeks, and then everyone's like, "Oh, go get that guy! Go get that guy! He's so good." I'm like, no, you just know his name. That doesn't mean he's good. That means he was good.
Right, or he'd still be employed.
Exactly. It's every year. It's like, well, why don't they go get this guy? And I'm like, you mean the guy that the 31 other teams also said pass? I just find it so funny.
To me, it's been brought up a lot. It's getting louder now from fans, and to me, that doesn't seem like a solution that one, Dennis Allen wants to do, or two, I think would end up really helping the team either, just because of previous experience with Carr doesn't mean it's going to translate here again.
It would like just be a guy
I got more of a problem with his issues with the league, and then what are other coaches and players going to think about a guy like Gruden joining this staff? Are people going to have problems with it?
Yeah, and like if the idea is everyone's already pissed off at Derek Carr to begin with, then I don't think having to sit through John Gruden would necessarily make anyone happier. And like I guarantee, like everyone, with how quickly everyone's become disenchanted with Derek Carr, you think that how long do you think it would take before everyone was ready to run John Gruden out of town?
2 plays,
right? One loss, done. So I don't know. There's no winning. But hopefully the Saints turn things around. Let's end this segment. We're going to dive into more of what's going on with the Colts, what to expect from Jonathan Taylor, Zach Moss, and company, Gardner Minshew. That's a good.
Just say Uncle Rico like Bobby.
Uncle Rico, I'm a fan of that. Well, what can they expect out of him, right? What is Shane Steichen thinking, kicking a 60-yard field goal in the first half of a 14-14 game? Anyway. There's all those things. So Lawrence Owen's going to break a lot of that down for us. This is Inside Black and Gold. Thanks, everyone, for listening. Thanks, everyone, for engaging. If you haven't subscribed yet, please do that. I really do appreciate it. Leave us a rating. Leave us a review wherever you can. And hit me up on Twitter at Jeff_Nowak. You can hit Steve up at Steve Geller WWL. Let us know what you think. Give us suggestions, any ideas for segments you'd like us to hit. We're constantly just running over the same things over and over again. So
where to get your best eyeliner at? Let us know.
Yeah, right. We're at the bottom of the barrel when we're talking about Maybelline commercials here, and so yeah, anything you have, we'll take it. There's no bad ideas. But anyway, this is Inside Black and Gold. We're getting ready for Week 8. Stick around. And we're back on Inside Black and Gold. Jeff Nowak alongside Steve Geller. As always, we are getting you ready for Saints 3-4 at Colts 3-4. No one better to break that down with than Lawrence Owen, as promised, host of the Bleav in Colts podcast, and also has a show called Colts Law on YouTube. It's a play on the name, in case you're wondering. I don't think it's a legal podcast, but I think it still works. Lawrence, now my first question. We have a nickname for Gardner Minshew. At least Bobby Aber has a nickname for Gardner Minshew. He calls him Uncle Rico. And I am curious, as you've gone about covering Gardner, do you think he can too throw the ball over those mountains?
No. All right. All right. I mean, if you got like a love child between Anthony Richardson and Gardner Minshew, maybe, but not just straight Gardner Minshew.
Yeah. But in more seriousness, obviously this is a season that started one way and is now going a very different way in terms of you got Anthony Richardson. They went big on him. He's a guy who I really liked in the draft. I wasn't sure I liked in the top 10, but I did like him. And now you are having the Gardner Minshew experience, which it seems like he's kind of the new Ryan Fitzpatrick. Everywhere he goes, he will inevitably start. He is inevitable. So how has that gone the last few weeks? And what is the Colts offense kind of looking like now with the switch from Anthony to Gardner?
It is an emotional roller coaster. I'm telling you what. All right. When it comes to production, like yardage and scoring, and it's up here, it's like, wow, this guy, he's accurate. He makes decent decisions. He puts guys in positions to make plays with the football. It's amazing. And then you look and you're like, oh no, he just gave the ball away to the other team at their own 15-yard line. What are we doing here? We just got 2 sacks, strip sacks in the end zone 2 weeks in a row, right? I mean, that's crazy. He's got 8 turnovers in the past 2 weeks. That is not a recipe for success.
Yikes.
Yes, he can move the football. Yes, he can get the ball down the field and score, but then you got that low where you're like, oh, now we got to climb out of that.
Yeah, we understand that totally. This year, having to deal with it, we've got the Derek Carr experience going on, and a lot of folks making the joke, obviously, that we got sold a lemon, whatever you want to say. Trying to get the resale value of a used car. Trying to trade it back. But with the Colts offense, man, the running game has been obviously a huge strength of the squad, and man, I guess it's pretty safe to say Jonathan Taylor's back, huh?
I think maybe he's had one really good game. He had like 120 yards.
I figured against Cleveland,
right? But I mean, good Lord, yeah, you had Zach Moss, right, who missed week 1 due to a broken arm, then comes back, and through the first 5 weeks, he's like 3rd in the NFL in rushing yards, right? And you're like, oh, we don't need Jonathan Taylor. We, let him hold out or whatever it is that's going on. And then he's back for 2 weeks for practice, and bam, $14 million a year. It's like, well, Chris Ballard's seen enough. All right. Right now, the running game, the running back room is very, very solid. Got a great 1-2 punch. And we showed that against the Browns, number 1 defense in the league. And between those 2 backs, they both had 36 carries, 18 apiece, and they were productive against that defense.
Yeah, I mean, it's weird how holdouts end when the offense looks like it hasn't missed a step without you. It probably doesn't, like Chris Jones with the Chiefs was sitting there for that opening game watching his team lose to the Lions. Like, what do you guys think now? Jonathan was like watching Zach Moss ball out. Like, this isn't great for my standing. But one thing that's interesting in the Saints and the Colts, I think anytime you bring in a new head coach, there's going to be questions. What's the decision making going to be like? How are they going to react in certain situations? How analytically inclined are they going to be? For the Saints, it's every situation to be conservative. You are, it seems, especially in terms of kicking field goals and when to punt, when to go for it. In this last game, I saw Shane Steichen make the decision to attempt a 60-yard field goal in the first half of a 14-14 football game. It got blocked. They ended up sacrificing 3 points in that exchange. They lost by, you can remember the number. How do you feel about that, first of all? And, is that kind of indicative of his philosophy of, no risk it, no biscuit kind of thing? Or was that just kind of a one-off?
Well, you see, the thing about Shane Steichen that I've noticed is he kind of plays a little 50-50 with analytics and gut. Right. And I love that about a coach. Analytics is great, but sometimes when you get into a game, you just got to know how the flow of the game is going, and you got to use your gut instincts on that. And at that point, the defense was playing very, very well. The points that they were giving up was because of turnovers and touchdowns and things of that nature. And he was just thinking, you know what, get points where you can at this point. And there has been times this year where he would have went for it, in that position, or he would have went for it, near the goal line, on 4th down, things of that nature. So I'm at the point where I'm just going to trust. I like where he's going with right now in his decision-making process. There is a learning curve, obviously, coming from, as Steve and I was talking about earlier, where when you have a first-time head coach coming in from a coordinator, there's a learning curve from coordinator to head coach. And it takes a couple years. in order to start to get the feel of games to make those correct decisions. Is he going to be perfect every time? Absolutely not. But he's got to learn from those times that he is not on top of his game.
Looking at the Colts receiving core, I don't think, and obviously no huge names on this roster, but some guys that pretty reliable hands in the group. Just curious your take on Pittman and Downs.
Okay. So I see Michael Pittman Jr. and he's got a nickname. Apparently Shane Steichen gave him the Enforcer, right?
Okay.
He's that big physical dude that's going to go out there and outmuscle you for a catch or block you down the field during a run play or a screen play or something of that nature. He's out there to set the tone for the offense, which is amazing when you have a tone setter on the perimeter, right? You're used to having tone setters on offensive line, maybe tight end or running back, but not out on the perimeter. And that really helps out a ton. Very sure catch, something that I've seen Michael Pittman do when it comes to games and catches is he wins 50-50 balls just consistently, right? You throw him the ball, even if the defender has position on him, right in front of him, Pittman will go up over you, reach down, grab the football, bring it in, right? Really like what Pittman brings to the table. Each of these receivers on this team brings a different element. As you talk about with Josh Downs, the rookie, he's that smaller, shifty kind of guy that can get out there and make corners second guess themselves on where his cut is going to be, right? Is he cutting left? Is he cutting right? Is he going post? Is he going corner? What's he going to do? And I think that really helps him in being able to create space and get catches. And he, again, has pretty sure hands for a smaller receiver in the NFL. And that's the most important thing as a receiver. Make sure you have the football. Whatever happens after the catch, that's icing on the cake, right?
Yeah, I mean, kind of just looking at the other side of the ball too, one of the things that stood out to me in that game was not only that the Colts could run the ball, it seemed like they had a whole host of problems stopping the run. I know Jerome Ford had a long run. Kareem Hunt, it's the game. You see the Browns and you're like, oh, they ran it for a ton of yards. And you're like, yeah, of course they did. They have Nick Chubb. Well, they don't have Nick Chubb. This is Kareem Hunt and Jerome Ford. I think it's Jerome Ford. Is it Jacoby Ford? I think it's Jerome Ford. There was a Jacoby Ford, but I think it's Jerome Ford now. Anyway, so you look at this defense and you're like, oh, Zaire Franklin has a whole mess of tackles. I think it's 88, leads the NFL. And this is a defense that typically you look at, it's like, oh, look, Shaq Leonard, he's going to have 140 tackles. Well, he's still there, but you're racking up all. And is that more of a product of the plays aren't necessarily being stopped at the line of scrimmage? Because it kind of feels like that's an area that the Colts are susceptible this year, is just runs between the tackles.
Legitimately, I'm gonna say the Colts actually are pretty decent play-by-play stopping the run, right? Okay. They give up one or two big plays a game. That's the problem, right? That game that you just talked about with that big 67-yard run, you take that away, the Colts give up an average of like 3 yards a carry, right? It's not something that's huge, but those big plays matter. Those big plays are tone setters for the game, right? It gives your offense and your defense something to kind of build on emotionally and be able to go out there and play even better when the defense has to go out on the field, or vice versa. So that's a situation. I think the defensive line is good, and they have been good. The biggest problem is Grover Stewart. The combination between DeForest Buckner and Grover Stewart is no longer there, with Grover Stewart being suspended for 6 games, and it just started this past week. And with him not being there, that puts a lot of added pressure on your backups, guys that aren't normally your starters, and they're out there for a lot more snaps than they're used to. So, you're going to end up having to, the other guys around him are going to have to step up and play even better. And at times there's going to be mistakes. There's going to be, missed assignments or a missed tackle here or there. But for the most part, I like what our defensive line and our linebackers bring, to the team itself.
He mentioned, obviously, Zaire Franklin. How how has it been watching his progression from a 7th round draft pick? And this dude's just like a tackling monster.
Oh my goodness. It's nuts. This dude brings his special. Okay. So you have to have a different mindset to play special teams. Straight up.
Sure.
You can't worry about your personal health, right? I think Nyheim Hines said it a few years back, as a punt returner, you just have to go out there and be like, I don't care if I live or die. I mean, and that's basically the mindset that special teamers have to have because of the high impact plays that they have every time they go out there on the field. And he's brought that same mindset to an every down linebacker on defense. He goes out there and he plays 100% full throttle, no matter what. And that's just exciting. And I think that lifts the team in general, on defense. You see a guy go out there and just lay some serious wood on somebody, that's going to make you want to go out there and do I can't let him outshine me. Right. I mean, that's how that works. So yeah, it's been a spark, especially since I think Jeff over here earlier talked about Shaquille Leonard. He's not been playing his best football as of late. So to have that kind of tone setter at the linebacker position when the guy that normally is the tone setter is not there and not playing to his best is a real gift.
Yeah, speaking of tone setters, one thing, and I haven't got a chance to watch all the Colts games, but I did go back and watch the Browns-Colts game, and it was a long one. I mean, there was a lot going on, but it does feel like Zach Moss is on the offense kind of that tone setter of he just runs hard. I mean, he doesn't go down that first hit. He's always falling forward. So I am curious, what have been your thought? What has made him so successful this year? Because he kind of feels like, I think he was on the Bills and he was just kind of a cast off of never really got the opportunity. I think he was in that timeshare with Devin Singletary for a while, but he's dealing with an injury. I want to say, let's see, elbow/heel. What is your read on that? Does that seem like something that might keep him out this week? Obviously he was a DNP on Wednesday. And just what has he been to this offense in general?
Now from the DNP standpoint of did not practice, it could just be, give him a little bit of time, right? Just your day off. You obviously get the feeling better. We see this a lot in the NFL nowadays with veterans, right? Where you might get a ding or a bruise or something of that nature. And they're like, you know what, just take a day off, maybe even 2 days off, and then come back and have your full practice on Friday. Right. So I'm hoping that's kind of what's going on with Zach Moss, but you're absolutely right. He is a tone setter on offense. The thing that sets him apart is he's not a guy who just attacks a hole. As soon as he gets the ball, he goes, he tries to get the yard. He waits. He knows he's got a good offensive line in front of him, and he waits for that offensive line to finish their blocks and set them, because sometimes the hole's not where it's supposed to be on the offensive line, because the defense has shifted or whatnot. So he's very patient. He waits for a hole to open, then he hits it. And the way he hits the hole, it's very powerful, but when he feels the contact coming on, you watch him and he gets slim. He'll turn his body or adjust in a specific way to where it's a glancing blow rather than a full-on blow, and he's able to fall forward or break that tackle in that instance. And I think that's been a huge benefit to him. Honestly, I think the Bills gave up on him. I don't understand why the Bills let him go. I understand that the Bills are a pass-first team, not a run-first team. They don't run the football with the running backs a whole lot, and I think that was a detriment to a running back of Moss's style, who likes to be physical between the tackles, a guy who literally would get better as the game goes on, rather than, having someone that's just explosive and you use him early in the game and hope for big plays.
Yeah, for perspective, for people listening, he was traded with a pick. The Bills traded Zach Moss and a draft pick. It was a 6th round pick for Nyheim Hines. So like they were just trying to cut bait basically and saying, okay, we want our pass catching return specialist guy. Like they gave up on him. And now he's a guy who's, if not for Jonathan Taylor returning, might have led the league in rushing this year. So, I mean, it just goes to show you, like, one person's trash is another person's treasure. Like if you're in the right situation, and like you mentioned, that offensive line, a lot of people, like you look at Dak Prescott, the beginning of his career. I don't think Dak Prescott is the quarterback he is today if he didn't come into the league with such an entrenched, very, very good offensive line. And over time, as you have to pay people, that usually declines slightly. But yeah, what is your kind of, is that offensive line like legit? I mean, obviously Quentin Nelson, everyone knows that name, but across the line, what has been your read on it this year?
When healthy, it's one of the best offensive lines in football, right? Your starters across this board. Bernard Ryman, the second-year left tackle, has made huge, monstrous steps, right? Along with the second-year right guard in Will Fries. You know, he's made big steps this past offseason. And the other three guys are all pros, right? I mean, they're all good players. Quentin Nelson, Ryan Kelly, and Braden Smith out there at right tackle. Those guys, when you have three really, really good veterans and you're able to plug in some young guys that you don't have to pay right now, even though you are technically paying high money on that offensive. I think they're paying fifth most in the NFL right now for their offensive line. When that offensive line is healthy and they're all on the field, they are a menace to defensive front sevens.
You don't mind paying the fifth most if you have a top 5 offensive line, right?
Right. Because I mean, the offensive line, they set the tone for the entire game and in the run game and the pass game, right? So I mean, why wouldn't a team be willing to drop money as long as they produce at the same level? Why wouldn't a team be willing to drop that kind of money on an offensive line?
Looking at this matchup, you know, coming in, Saints also lost 2 in a row. So, you know, it's going to be two desperate teams, as I always talk about, fighting for a victory, trying to keep up pace in the division. I think it's kind of amusing. You know, everyone, at least we obviously focused on the NFC South and talked about how wide open it was going into the season. And looking at things now in the AFC South, man, obviously Jacksonville's built up a little lead there, but you look at a Houston Texans team that's definitely fighting under their first-year head coach. It looks like this Colts squad definitely rallying around their first-year guy. And Tennessee, yeah, maybe sellers at the moment look to be dropping off. But, man, Jags, Texans, and Colts, should we expect a pretty tight race through the rest of the season between them?
It's going to be a hill to climb for the Colts to get over the Jaguars because the Jaguars have already swept the Colts this season. They were the first rematch of the year for the NFL. And, you know, the Colts basically said, here's the football in their second match and said, here, you can have this game, you know, by turning the football over so many times. So when you get swept by your division opponent, it is a tall task to try to climb over that, but it's not undoable. It's not unheard of, right? It can happen. They haven't fell behind in the overall win-loss column so far that they can't win a bunch of games in a row and possibly just, you know, the heck with the sweep and the tiebreaker. You know, we just have a better record than you. We'll see what happens though. Right now the Colts have beaten the Texans handily in their first meeting, and ever since then the Texans, as you said, has looked really, really good ever since the Colts beat them. So I'm just like, oh crap, you know. now we got three teams in this division, and as you said, the Titans look like they're just like, okay, white flag, we give up. We're going to play for next year.
Get ready for the Will Levis experience. But you know, speaking of rookies, I am curious. Obviously, this doesn't really have anything to do with this week, but it does have to do with the AFC South for the long term. And Anthony Richardson, you know, was a guy that just flew up draft boards. I would say a lot on just hype and hope that he could turn into the player that everyone kind of expects him to be, but haven't quite seen yet. So I am curious I know you only saw 4 or so games, but what is kind of the early evaluation on Anthony Richardson? He's got obviously the shoulder surgery. He'll be back next year. Same injury that Derek Carr had actually, and it was just a more significant version. And that's what you have to have surgery if you have a significant AC sprain to correct that ligament damage. But again, what is kind of the early evaluation on Anthony? Does he seem like the franchise quarterback, or is the jury kind of still out there?
So I'm going to take us back to when the Colts drafted him, and there was 2 points that I had. I was like, this guy is a project guy unless he can show me 2 things in training camp, right? And I got to training camp, I was sitting there on the sidelines of training camp watching, came up, talked to him, talked to some of the coaches. And the two things that I was worried about was there. And I was like, oh my, this dude just needs experience, right? And those two things was his pocket awareness, to be able to know when he was going to get pressure and how he reacted to that pressure. And he does maybe one of the best pocket awareness guys coming out of college I've ever seen. It's just is absolutely amazing how he could feel a pressure and move. Not just, when you think about a mobile quarterback, you think, oh, well, he's going to just take off out of the pocket and run down the field. No, he has that move around in the pocket like your traditional pocket passers, like your Tom Brady's and Drew Breeses and Peyton Manning's. Just move around in the pocket a little bit to adjust, to give himself a little bit of time. He's got that in his pocket. Plus, he's got that mobility to where if the pocket completely breaks down, he can just escape and extend the play so he can look downfield to throw. The other thing I was worried about was his pre-snap defense recognition. Yeah. Right. You got to have both pocket awareness and pre-snap defense recognition, be able to recognize what the defense is doing before the snap. You can see where the pressure might be coming from, how they're set up to defend a pass or a run or whatnot, so you can check out or whatever you need to do. And his recognition looked pretty good. Now, his accuracy, that was a problem, right? It was like 1 minute he could make an amazing, how in the world did he make that pass? And the next minute's like, how in the world did he miss that pass? Right. So that was an issue. But that was the biggest issue that we had with him. Everything else looked great. I do feel like with experience and a little bit more work on his passing, decision-making and accuracy wise, I think he could absolutely be a top 5 quarterback in the NFL. I think he needs more time and more experience. And sadly, that injury, that's derailed that for the time being.
We go into these matchups too. We like to ask our guests if there was maybe an X factor that, fans don't really know about. At least Saints fans don't know the name at least that much, considering some of the bigger guys on the Colts, who could be maybe one of those unknowns on offense or defense that could be a big factor in this matchup on Sunday.
Any single one of the tight ends that the Colts have on their roster. All of them.
And they are
all very good tight ends and underused.
I'm just asking you to name them.
Okay. Getting ready to.
Yeah.
All right. First, we have Mo Alley Cox, who's the veteran in the tight end room.
Yeah.
Right. A guy who's 6'7", long arms, good blocker.
Texans, I want to say. He was on the Texans. Make that up? Never mind. I don't think he was on the Texans.
No, he was never on the Texans to my knowledge. Then we have Kylan Granson, third-year tight end. He's right now coming off, I believe, a concussion. I don't know if he's going to make it in this game or not, but he is that speed tight end, that receiving style tight end. And then we have Drew Ogletree, who is another very similar to a Mo Alley Cox, who's in his second year. Last year was out the entire year due to an injury in training camp. Had the injury right after I interviewed him too. Oh, sad.
So
I got blamed for that. You believe that? And then we got our rookie Will Mallory, who is another receiving tight end. They're all very
Miami, right?
Yeah, very effective guys who can be matchup nightmares for an opposing team's defense. Whether you put a tight end or a safety over them, it's very difficult to match up against these guys.
Gotcha. We've been chatting with Lawrence Owen, host of the Bleav in Colts podcast. He also has a show on YouTube called Colts Law. We're getting ready for Saints Colts. Saints fans will be hoping that the Gardner Minshew show ends right in time, as it has the last 2 times they've faced them. But thanks so much, Lawrence. Appreciate everything. Very insightful.
Hey, thanks for having me on. Feel free to reach out anytime.
Sounds good, man.
Awesome stuff. Thank you.
Appreciate it.
All right, thanks to Lawrence Owen for breaking that down. One thing he did mention before he left that we forgot to ask about, this is a Colts team that has been very susceptible to big plays. Their defensive back group is not what you might consider to be dominating, to say the least. So, what I told him is no one wants to hear me talk about how Derek Carr can take advantage of a defense, and so I'm not gonna tell you about how Derek Carr can take advantage of a defense, because until he does it, I'll just have to believe that it's impossible. Anyway,
in my actually a little side story here, in my big fantasy football big money league, Brock Purdy, I have him hurt. I had to make a drastic option. So guess who's on the waiver wire? I'm rolling with Derek Carr this week, baby.
I mean, statistically speaking, it's not the worst play in the world, right?
Right.
It's kind of like last year, Andy Dalton. I started him on that Thursday night matchup against the Cardinals. He threw 2 pick sixes, but he ended up having a pretty huge game. Like, you can have big games and still not play well. Like, that's the thing.
Did Juwan have 2 touchdowns that game?
I think so.
I think he did. Yeah, I'm not positive.
Yeah, I think he had 3 touchdowns across. Like, he had a late one against the Ravens that was kind of like a BS, like doesn't matter touchdown. Yeah, and I think he had 2 touchdowns against the Cardinals.
I thought so, right?
So yeah, we should get Juwan back. So yeah, I mean, from the perspective of 300-yard passing is going to be a decent fantasy day, right? I think
hopefully a couple touchdowns in there.
He had 1.
No, I'm just saying. I'm hoping this week,
especially going against the Colts, right? And like Lawrence said, it's just like there are big plays to be had. So I don't think it's a terrible play. I mean, in our 2 QB league, I'm starting like Zach Wilson and it's funny. So so Deshaun Watson didn't play in that game. He played for the first quarter plus and threw 5 passes and then left. It was PJ Walker for a majority of that game. So you saw what Lamar Jackson did to the Lions, right? So I have a league where I have my 2 quarterbacks are Deshaun Watson and Lamar Jackson. So I had like the extremes of the quarterback experience. One got me like 35, one got me -1. So they combined to be one average quarterback, and I lost by like 3 points. If I had Derek Carr, I would have won. So there you go.
Thanks, Deshaun.
Yeah, that is the one thing about 2 QB leagues is you get it. You like I am typically like wait forever to draft a quarterback in a 2 QB league. You got to go get him. Like I won last year in that league, and I drafted Joe Burrow in the 2nd round and Lamar Jackson in the 3rd round. You got to do it.
No, like you said,
or else you're stuck with
you
Zach
at least have to take one early on, or you're going to get bamboozled for sure.
Yeah, and if you deal with, like, I had drafted, I think I had Deshaun Watson and Aaron Rodgers in that league, and both of them obviously have not done anything. But anyway, this is not what we're here to talk about. I'll probably cut that out of the podcast, at least the non-video version. But this is Inside Black and Gold. We will be back. I want to talk about some. I forgot what I wanted to talk about.
Some black and gold stuff.
Yeah, I want to talk about, what exactly happened in that game against the Jaguars and what I'm concerned about as you go to face the Colts, because there are some similarities in how I think they're going to try to attack you. So let's break that down, and then we're going to dive into X factors as we do every week. Who can swing the result on offense, who can swing the result on defense, and why we're going to be wrong about whatever we say. So anyway, keep it locked on Inside Black and Gold. And we're back. One more segment to go on Inside Black and Gold. We're going to break down some of the issues I've seen on defense over the last few weeks, particularly in this season, especially in the games the Saints have struggled in. And, how do we fix that going forward? Now, and then we're going to break down our X factors on offense and defense. But, Steve, this is something that you brought up, and I don't think we got a chance to go over it on the podcast yet in depth, but I did go and I hand timed every single Trevor Lawrence drop back in that game. Right. And the indication I had watching it live ended up being accurate, which is he was just getting that ball out of his hands so fast. And that's frustrating for a defense in general, because especially a defensive line, because you can't really do anything. Tom Brady was like that. We can go back to that week 2 game with Tom Brady in the Superdome, and it's like, well, you didn't get any sacks in that game. And I was like, yeah, he was getting the ball out in 2 seconds, right? And if you're playing from ahead, you can do that. And that's the bigger issue is you allowed them to get out to a lead so that they didn't have to take any risks with their injured quarterback. Now, if you're up 14-7 in the second half, or you're up by, even if you're tied and they feel like they have to make something happen, that's when Trevor Lawrence's longest drop back of the day, his only drop back of over 3 seconds, that was not a play action or a fake or a throwback pass. It was a deep shot down the right sideline when the game was tied. And it's not a coincidence that when the game is tied and the Jags feel like they need to make something happen, suddenly he's standing there giving you a chance to come after him. The rest of the game was one read and out. And, and Bobby keeps saying no pressures the entire game. And I hear him say that, and I'm just like, I get why you're saying that because the statistics say that. But if you watch these games, why do you think he scrambled? He had 4 scrambles in the game. They totaled 59 yards, right? And he was the second leading rusher in that game. And those were the pressures, right? You could say they had 4 pressures because they forced him out of the pocket. The issue is you didn't contain him. You just let him go. And that's been the biggest problem, in my opinion, in terms of you weren't able to get Jordan Love on the ground. You weren't able to get Baker Mayfield on the ground. You weren't able to get, as I hit the screen, you weren't able to get out on the ground really until that second half when you were able to make some things happen. And that's been a big issue. And I don't know how you adjust. I think this game, DeMario's knee injury might have been a factor in terms of, I don't know if he was as quick to things as he normally would be. But like that's been a huge issue. And Gardner Minshew is not going to stand in the pocket either. Gardner's going to want to move around. Not a great athlete, but neither is Baker Mayfield. I would actually consider Gardner and Baker to be very similar in terms of quarterback style. Obviously, Baker has a much better, much more significant pedigree in terms of his number 1 overall pick, right? But, they're going to do similar things in the sense of extending plays, and he's not going to just run to run, but he is going to run when you give him a lane. One of his touchdown runs, it was from 18 yards out, and he just juked a guy. And so, to me, that's the issue. It's not necessarily the pressure. It is making sure that when you do pressure a guy, you don't give him a lane. You don't give him a release valve. And because with a 4-3 defense that plays a lot of man on the outside, you don't have the benefit of 3 guys standing there looking back in at the quarterback because you're sitting in zone. Because they're turning around and running upfield. So it has to be that front 7 that contains. And if the Saints can't do that against Gardner Minshew, it's going to be a long day. They've been able to do it in the past, so I have some confidence that they'll be able to do it again. But, Shane Steichen was also there for that game last year against the Eagles. He has an idea of going to try to play Gardner Minshew, and he'll be able to adjust. So, to me, that's a huge part of this game is can you figure out a way to contain quarterbacks that want to run? Because those 59 yards were massive in that game from Trevor Lawrence.
Yeah, and thinking back to last year, the Minshew with the Eagles, I was really impressed how the Saints front was able to get after that the Eagles offensive line that obviously gets so much praise.
Right. Yeah, I mean, right. And with the same players you're looking at today.
Right.
I guess not. With the same edges you're looking at today in terms of Cam Jordan and Carl Granderson were big in that game. Interestingly, Alontae Taylor didn't really play in that game. He was basically a special teams player. So, I mean, that is something that you can throw at them as a wrinkle in terms of they didn't deal with that last year. Shane Steichen's team didn't deal with that. And because I think you had Roby in the slot for that game and you had Adebo and Lattimore on the outside. Now, obviously, Roby's gone. And so Alontae's in the slot. So, yeah. But, I mean, that's going to be a big part of it.
What's been your take with Cam Jordan this year, man? I know it's a guy, we expect big things from, obviously, vocal leader, but just really hasn't been able to apply that pressure. Hasn't really come up. He had that one gift of a fumble recovery, but other than that, what does he have? A 1 sack on the season?
Well, he has 1 sack, but there were 2 split sacks.
Okay.
So it's, it's like
okay.
If he was the only one that got there, it would be 2.
I got you right.
He should have had one against Baker. The issue I think has been, and I think, saying someone lost a step is usually a negative thing, but I think it's like when you're talking about a 33-year-old guy, 34-year-old guy, they lost a step from their prime. It's impossible not to. The question is, how significant is that? And is it too much that you're unable to make up for it with the knowledge in your brain, right? Like DeMario, for example, he's not the same player he was at 26, but he is a better player now in terms of how he understands the game and the speed at which he can play at. I'd say the same about Cam. The problem is I think Cam forgets that. And he doesn't necessarily hedge the way he needs to at this point in his career to be able to make some plays, thinking he can still chase them down when you're not 26-year-old Cam Jordan. But I don't think he's been terrible. He's never been a huge sack number guy. He's always been a guy that occasionally you'll end up seeing a 4-sack day, and then he's going to end up with 12 on the season or 10 on the season. Like, that's always been his MO, and people have always complained that he's not productive enough because he's a run player first, and that's just not a sexy thing to be a run player in the NFL, but he is. And he plays the run well. You would like to see more pressure from him, and you would like to see particularly more smart pressure in terms of not allowing plays to get behind you and not allowing cutback lanes where you just can't get there. So I don't know. I don't think we've necessarily seen a major drop off from Cam.
Right. That's what I've been worried about, kind of thing, just because obviously the numbers aren't there.
Yeah, I mean, but he had a slow start in 2021, right? And then he picked up really, it was funny. He went out with COVID and then he came back and he had like 5 sacks in 3 games, right? So he's always been a guy that, from a pass rush perspective, it's, he'll rack them up in a hurry and then everyone will stop talking about it. But, this has not been unusual for him to go stretches without sacks. The real question to me is pressures. And so let's look up and see what are his pressure totals this year compared to past seasons. And I can do that pretty quickly here. So
yeah, I'll bring it up too, just because, for me, you obviously have somebody opposite him finally in Carl Granderson that seems to be that, that good running mate at creating that pressure on the edge. And Cam hasn't been getting home this season yet.
Yeah. So let's see. On the season, he has 23 hurries, 2 sacks, which again, it's like technically 1 sack, but there were 2 half sacks, but they were separate. So it's not like he only has gotten to the quarterback once. So it's not a huge difference, but it is somewhat of a difference. Right. When you consider you're talking about the difference between 4 and 12 is, you can make that up in 2 games if you have a good enough game. So let's see. In 2021, he had 27 total hurries. In 2022, he had 24 total hurries. In 2023, he has 23 through 7 games.
Really?
Yes. He had 41 in 2020. He had 59 in 2019, 45 in 2018, 47 in 2017, 54 in 2016, 50 in 2050. And so realistically, if you're looking at that number, you're saying he's been pressuring quarterback at a higher rate. And that probably is due to Carl Granderson being on the opposite side and him not getting as much attention. The problem is you have not turned those into sacks or QB hits. And so, and I think that's kind of what we're talking about is you have to be a little smarter about how you're pressuring the quarterback because, like there was a play against the Bucs, the touchdown play where, Baker just extended it and then dropped it up to Cade Otton. Cam Jordan was unblocked. He was right in Baker's grill and Baker made a miss. And I think that's the type of play that earlier in Cam's career, he probably makes. And right now, I don't know if he's right, if he's there, but either way, you're looking at a guy who, Pro Football Focus has him graded at a 79.7. You can take from that whatever you want. Based on their grades, you haven't seen a huge drop off. So I don't know. It's easy to just look at sack numbers and say, where is he? But I think it's a little more complicated than that. And like we talked about in week 7, it obviously is more complicated than that because of how quickly Trevor Lawrence was getting the ball out. But I guarantee you, if you asked Cam, he would tell you he hasn't been good enough.
That's great to know about the pressures this year. There was no way I would have guessed that they were that high, obviously.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know the technical difference between a pressure and a hurry, but either way, you're just looking at that same number.
Right.
His career high is 59. And, technically, you're not that far off that pace. Maybe they've been more generous with what a hurry is or a pressure this year than normal. I don't know. I've always wondered about that. Like, because it is kind of vague, right? Like, what do you consider? When do you make that determination of he's affecting the quarterback versus he's just there? Like he's not impacting the play versus he is. Anyway, but yeah, let's move on from there and let's keep it quick because we've been going on for a while. And I do need to get out to the facility at some point today, and let's get into X factors. And so, let's start on offense because we've been talking a lot about defense. Who would you say your offensive X factor is in this game?
Man, I think I said Derek Carr last game, and I got to go with my man again this matchup just because, talking to
What specifically about Derek Carr?
just needs to get on the same page with his receivers. I want to see that communication working better, the offense being more fluid. Hopefully that hurry up offense that we saw run can get brought over into this matchup. We've talked about it a lot. We know it can't get run on a constant basis, obviously, but to get some continuity and to get some kind of momentum going is going to be key for this offense. And we heard from Lawrence, the Colts guest, about how easily this team could take advantage of a Colts secondary. And when you got elite talents like a Chris Olave, I'm hoping he has a huge bounce back game, obviously, in this too, considering what's happened with him on the field, off the field kind of BS. But just all around, let's see the passing game have a big outing. And it's not just because I picked up Derek Carr in fantasy football this week.
Homer.
Yeah, right. Exactly.
Lawrence of Arabianapolis.
Oh, nice. Very well
done.
done.
Thank you. So I to me, in watching that condensed game, and that's the best way I can just get a quick early read on the team they're about to face. Is I watched the condensed game from a week earlier, and there's really no point in going back too far for the Colts as you look at them on offense. On defense, one of the things that stands out to me is they're susceptible to long plays in the run game, and in a lot of instances they're coming from inside the tackles. And so I think there's a few things that are going to happen in this game. You're hoping to get Juwan Johnson back, and if you do, he'll probably be on a pitch count, but I think that's going to directly impact pass catcher Taysom Hill, and I think you're going to limit what you're asking him to do there, and hopefully that means you can get him some more action as a runner, because the way that they get beat in the run game, it's not anything crazy. It's just they get blocked and they hang on blocks and they allow you to get ahead of steam and get out there. And so I think that there's a chance that this ends up looking something like the Saints Seahawks game in week 5 of last year. And obviously Taysom, I'm not saying Taysom is going to have 4 touchdowns, but I do think that Taysom Hill has the ability to make an impact on this game similarly to how he made an impact on that game, because I don't think they're going to be able to come up and make those tackles. There's always going to be situations where you look at it and you're like, Taysom Hill and that power run scheme matches up really well against this team specifically, this defense, a team that, yes, they do fly around the field, but they don't have a ton of beef inside. They're not going to be that kind of heavy front seven that's going to be able to stack up like the 49ers and shut you down. So the Bucs are a better example probably in terms of a team they've played this year. So I think to me, I think if you can get, 60, 80 rushing yards, maybe a touchdown or 2 out of Taysom Hill in that kind of way, the way you really haven't seen yet this year, I think that could be a huge factor. That's my X factor on offense.
No, Taysom time, when he gets into a groove, you can see sometimes they feed the hot hand, and man, he has delivered, obviously.
Yeah, and there's also been some weird, I will say, and this is something I've been talking about to myself, is, there's a difference between reporting and gossip. If you're reporting something and you get told something and you look into it and you report it out and you share it, that's reporting. If you get told something, if you're getting told by someone that someone else said something about someone,
This sounds like high school now,
and that's the depth, that's gossip. And I get told things that I don't share, but when I stand in front of someone and ask someone a very specific question and he tells me the answer and I tell that back to you, call it what you want. I don't think Derek Carr minds giving up snaps to Taysom Hill is what I'm getting at there. Anyway, moving on. Let's go to the defense. Steve, who is your defensive X factor?
It's been easy. I think over the last couple of weeks, it's always been focused on the D-line. I do think obviously it's going to be big against a running duo like the Colts have in this matchup. But I'm going to look at Pete Werner going into this game. Just a guy I really haven't heard much of this season, and I want him to, flex his muscles a bit and make an impact hopefully be able to force a fumble, something like that in this matchup. Tackle for, big tackle for loss. I don't know. I've been expecting more from Warner, and it just hasn't been delivering for me.
Yeah, no, I tend to agree with you there. I don't think he's been bad.
Right.
But he first 5 or 6 games before the ankle injury last year, he was everywhere. He was a machine. He was on pace for like 120 solo tackles, and you just haven't seen it at that level. And I don't know, maybe you're overreacting, and it's just, I don't know. The defense has played pretty well, but I haven't seen him make that all around impact this year that you saw last year. And so I agree with that. Although he does have his first ever sack, first interception, so he has been making an impact. So who knows? But I agree with you.
It's just really tough. Like I said, I don't know how many weeks I can go through picking defensive linemen.
No, I agree. I'm not going to pick defensive linemen either. I'm going to pick the interferers. And that is the Saints have 10 pass interference penalties through 7 games. The next closest team in the NFL has 6. So you have been called for pass interference at nearly double the rate of the second highest penalized team for that specific penalty.
How many does Debo have?
That's a good question. I know
Okay,
he has a handful of them, but Marshawn has a few too. I remember vividly that one against Mike Evans where he just got beat and reached out and grabbed. I actually think that was a good pass interference penalty because, obviously it's not good that you got beat, but he would have easily scored a touchdown, so you at least prevented that. I think he also had one against Nico Collins in week 6. So, he's had them too, right? That's at least 20% of your pass interference penalties on those two. Paulson and Debo, I think Paulson, so he had a couple of the pass interference penalties, but I also think they have 7 defensive holding penalties, and he's been a culprit on multiple of those. So whether it's pass interference or defensive holding, he's been an issue on that. And Alontae Taylor has a couple himself too. So, I think that those penalties, pass interference penalties, they really don't show up in the stat sheet. They show up on the penalties line, which obviously is in the stat sheet. But when you're talking about, you're looking at, so-and-so only threw for 240 yards. Well, if he had 60 yards gifted to him on pass interference penalties, those count, whether they go for the quarterback or the receiver or not. I've always felt like you should just give the receiver the yards on a pass interference penalty, but because why is he getting penalized in statistically when the yardage still exist? Anyway, but to me, that's been a huge factor in a lot of these games, and I think it will continue to be a factor in this game. And I just need to see, especially Paulson. You're not wrong to single out Paulson, because I think what happens is he feels like he gets beat, and his reaction is to grab and to pull and yank jerseys, and you don't always have to do that, right? There was a play against the Jags. He got called for defensive holding, and it was a defensive hold, but all he really had to do was put his hands up and say, okay, if you make this catch, good on you. And the ball ended up going 10 yards over his head. And that's, I get it. You're playing aggressive defense, and you get a little handsy, and you want to be in their hip pocket, and you're going to get called for a few extra penalties with that. And you kind of just have to accept it. It's how you play. Being penalized for pass interference at twice the rate of the second highest team in the NFL, that ain't it. So hopefully they can start to clean that up. And because I think that the defensive secondary has been very good, generally speaking. You just haven't, there's been those critical moments like the Packers game, for example. I think they pretty much went the entire length of the field on 2 pass interference penalties. So I think that's where I need to see this team get better. And that's my X factor.
Yeah. And, sticking with a little bit with the secondary, it'd be nice to see Lattimore. Another pick 6 off of Minshew wouldn't hurt.
That is true. That is true. Anyway, that's all. That's all I got. You got anything else?
No, man. I'm hoping, come around for our post-game, podcast, and that we're talking about a win, because thinking about losing 3 in a row, coming back to, home to play the Bears isn't very exciting to think about.
Yeah, I think we're on I think we're getting close to a cliff here.
Agreed.
I don't think you've fallen over the cliff yet.
No.
But you can see it.
Yes.
It's there. It's
You
there.
feel it.
And you can either start to make that turn. You got a bye week coming up, and I think that's the cliff, is the bye week. You got to start to make that turn now, because at a certain point you're going way too fast, and you can hit the brakes. You're flying over. And I think this next 2 weeks is where you got to make that turn. And if you don't, this could get real ugly. And I personally, I don't enjoy covering misery. I don't enjoy that. That's not why I got into sports journalism, to have to explain to fans why everything sucks all the time. But that's been what it is for the last 2 years. and it's about time that this team and this franchise figured something out and did something. The last positive thing I can recall was like 38-3 over the Packers, and everyone was like, "Oh my God, the post Drew Brees era is going to go great." It hasn't.
To me, my flashbacks are all the way still preseason, that first drive, and I'm like, man, this Derek Carr offense is going to be amazing.
See, I had a feeling everyone was going to overreact to that the same way they overreacted to when Jameis went down the field against the Chargers. Everyone's like, "We got this." Don't overreact to preseason, guys. It's that's just another case of that. And it's just, yeah. I mean, it's better than them looking bad in the preseason, but clearly there's not a lot of lines to be drawn from how successful that drive is and how successful his offense is going to look. But
yeah, Detillier, I think, said it the best. He always says, preseason's a mirage.
Yeah, until it isn't, and then everyone's right.
Sure.
All right, let's get to wrap it up for us here on Inside Black and Gold. We'll be back on Monday. This is our kind of road trip schedule. We'll be back on Monday. We'll probably do it live if we have the wherewithal to get that done. Don't quote me on that, but we'll have that post-game pod. Hopefully it's a post-win pod. Check us out at Saints_pod on Twitter. I'm on Twitter at Jeff_Nowak. He's at Steve Geller, WWL. The nice thing is when I don't have to say a second name, I can just say the Twitter handle, and that's the name. That saves a whole lot of time. But check out the latest news, notes, and analysis over on WWL.com. You can catch Steve on the pregame show, and then on the pregame show to the pregame show, and then the pregame show, and then also the postgame show on WWL, AM 870, FM 105.3, and on the Audacy app. You can catch me on the broadcast for those like 8 some odd minutes that I talk throughout the course of a game. That's the same stuff. And I appreciate everybody for listening. Let us know what you think. Hit the subscribe button. Give us a rating. Give us a review. Tell us if you'd like to see anything, if you'd like to hear anything, if you'd like to talk more about Guyliner, we can do that. Otherwise, Steve, what you got? Hit him with it.
No, enjoy Indy. I'm kind of jealous. I never took a road trip there. Don't know much about the scene in Indianapolis, but I have heard it's pretty much like a walking city where you can kind of easily get around like New Orleans.
We'll see. Let's do it. All right, y'all. Who dat? Go Saints.
Let's do it, folks.
Be easy, y'all. Peace.